If there's something everyone can agree on right now, it's that Joe Biden is toast. How did it all go so disastrously wrong for Joe, and is forcing him out really the best strategy for beating Trump in November? Let's back up.
Far behind in the polls, it may well be the violence in Wisconsin in a summer of heated protest plays to Trump's bid for re-election. Fear has historically been a powerful weapon in U.S. politics.
2020. Donald Trump, in the final year of his first term, is flailing. Dogged by the mass protests over racial inequalities sparked by George Floyd's death, his heavy-handed law and order response only inflames the unrest and leaves middle-of-the-road suburban and working-class voters with nothing but nostalgia for a time before all this craziness started. A time when politicians were dignified and said things like, "Sir, this is unconstitutional," or whatever. After a very messy primary season, Biden is the Democratic Party's nominee. Perhaps the most conservative of all the nominees, he offers no clear vision for a new America, but instead a return to normalcy.
The big donor is that he didn't want to demonize the wealthy and added that under his presidency, no one's standard of living will change. Nothing will fundamentally change.
But in 2020, the return to a time of dignified liberalism was the perfect foil to its opposite, the return to a time of maybe not so dignified conservatism. Biden was the perfect embodiment of this liberal nostalgia. His age and apparent borderline senility at the time were downplayed by his team, and in order to best counter these concerns, they ran what's termed as a low-exposure campaign, meaning he will be protected from an oversaturation of media scrutiny, only appearing when and where they are certain they can control the narrative. There was very little to be gained from having a gaffe-prone candidate out in the open every day when their opponent was such a prolific gaffe machine who couldn't resist being out in the open, whittling away at the percentage of his supporters who weren't of the die-hard MAGA variety. The Biden camp understood the concept of not interrupting your enemy when they're making a mistake. Trump's words and actions will be the noose he hangs himself with. Democrats knew all that was needed was a few percentage point swings in key battleground states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. They'd learned this lesson the hard way when Hillary Clinton had neglected to actively campaign in these blue-collar areas, but Biden was a candidate that did appeal to these key voters, and all he needed to do was stay quiet and say things like,
"We choose hope over fear, truth over lies. We are the United States of America."
once in a while, and rely on the power of the contrasting symbolism between his dignified liberalism and Trump's vulgar conservatism to carry him to the most votes ever received by a presidential candidate. But 4 years later, we see an incredible reversal of this dialectic.
The fate of President Biden's own re-election campaign appears to be hanging ever more perilously in balance, teetering. And if I'm to be honest with you, based on all the reporting here at CBS News, it feels as if that presidential campaign could tip over at any time.
Trump is somehow the dignified candidate. Biden, now dogged by mass protests over support for a genocide, has shattered the illusion of dignified liberal nostalgia, proving it to be nothing more than mushy symbolic platitudes that preside over the same forms of violent destruction as vulgar conservatism. The illusion of his mental acuity also died a fiery death in the debate. His aides have been putting out stories that, despite signs to the contrary, behind closed doors, the president was sharp as a tack, making deft, contemplative decisions on a daily basis.
Sharp, who is on top of his game, who knows what's going on.
He's smart. He's on his game.
I was in almost every meeting with the president, and the president was in front of and on top of it all.
Did anyone film that?
The weight of an additional 4 years of, let's face it, a pretty physically and mentally demanding job was finally too much to conceal, and the house of cards came tumbling down.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if
in this moment, I think what we're all expecting is for Trump to go for the jugular, but he doesn't.
We finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
He really only throws a few light jabs, says his piece about mentally insane immigrants, and calls it a day. The reason for this, I think, is the really scary part. Donald Trump is learning. Pretty much since 2016, we've known who Trump is and how he does things. It's full force, it's any means necessary. In the 2020 debate, Trump was the one who came apart. His constant interruptions and blame shifting coded as arrogant and petulant to an audience fed up with the past 4 years of executive chaos. Biden's comparatively calm demeanor and more dignified rhetorical style was enough to signal to voters he could be the man to return us to an Aaron Sorkin-style stupor.
Our elections are the envy of the world.
But now, the Trump camp is the one with a gaffe machine opponent, losing popularity over his handling of an international crisis, and losing support not only amongst voters but also amongst his closest establishment allies due to his age and declining mental abilities. Somehow, and I don't know how they did this, but they got the message through to Trump: don't attack Biden. Let Biden's words be the noose he hangs himself with. I don't know if they said, hey, you wrote the art of the deal. Well, this Sun Tzu guy was kinda like the Trump of ancient Chinese military strategy, and they started giving him like a proverb a day or something. I don't understand. You're saying I should be weak when I am strong? Why would I be weak when I could be strong? This book is so gay. But that's exactly what he's done in moments when Biden seems at his most broken and pathetic. Trump has actually shown restraint. It's like the part in the film when the monster does something new and you're like, oh yeah, we're so fucked now. And then, as if by divine providence, he was rewarded for this restraint in the most heroic manner possible.
Seeing Donald Trump get up after getting shot in the face and pump his fist in the air with the American flag is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life.
And it came right before the RNC, where he gets sworn in as the party's nominee, and during the peak of the storm for the Biden campaign on the defensive about his senility, and the only thing Biden can do in response is catch COVID and retreat behind closed doors. It's no wonder that during this moment, everyone wants to ditch poor old Joe. And then, after all his friends convince him he can't win, he finally drops out and endorses Kamala. I'm not saying Biden was in with a chance. Trump would have absolutely demolished him in November, but there's a lot of hype around Kamala that seems frankly delusional. She's been basically anonymous for the last 4 years, and when she ran during the 2020 primaries, her polling plummeted through the floor and she had to drop out months before voting even began.
People have been celebrating President Biden's endorsement of Kamala Harris all night. We are currently standing outside Bunker Club here in Northwest DC, where people are raising a glass to Kamala.
She is our next president. I'm sorry.
Your candidate is not a broadly popular national figure that holds resonance in those key blue-collar areas. Trump has bulldozed through everything that's been thrown at him. The libs celebrated his inability to pay a $400 million court settlement like this was it. We finally got him. Then he asks the judge to make it $100 million. The judge agrees and he secures a bond and pays it without flinching. He gave up no assets, meanwhile his meme stock company has added billions to his portfolio. After the assassination attempt, he received a boon to his war chest, and another of the court cases was thrown out by a loyal judge looking for an excuse to put an end to it. Sometimes it just seems there's an inevitability to history. All you can do is watch it crash over you like a tsunami, and then when the dust has settled and you've taken stock, that's when you can start to rebuild and regroup. Get back out there and with all your strength and courage of your convictions, blame everything on Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl, and I can't even identify for you what exactly it is.